Send me an email if you start picking up on this. If the BRICS starts talking, not just individuals mumbling about Bitcoin under their breath. If we start to see tangible moves by the 25 countries and counting, BRICS, the producers of the world, as you said, start seriously talking about Bitcoin, that's a different world. So that would catch my attention. The ideal world would be Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it. Ideal world for me, not for you.
Oh, because you want to buy it cheaper.
Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it, survives, and BRICS moves to it. And they go, bang.
Dave Collum, who calls himself a Bitcoin agnostic, raises a bigger question about the direction of digital money. Maybe, he says, the long-term plan from governments and elites was never about Bitcoin at all. It was about laying the groundwork for a central bank digital currency. If that's true, then all the effort from smart entrepreneurs and developers building out crypto infrastructure may have just been paving the way for CBDCs. He recalls a military analyst's meeting on crypto where Bitcoin wasn't even mentioned. That detail stuck with him. To Collum, it suggests that while policymakers and power players see blockchain and digital payments as useful, they don't necessarily view Bitcoin as the future. After all, why would the US, which benefits from running the global reserve currency system, willingly allow Bitcoin to replace it? Collum also questions Bitcoin's resilience. Yes, it has crashed and recovered many times, but it has never faced a true global liquidity crisis, a credit freeze so severe that everything sells off. Would Bitcoin survive that kind of event, or would it get crushed alongside everything else? For him, real trust in Bitcoin only comes if it can endure such a test and emerge intact. Even in 2020, when markets briefly seized up, central banks quickly drowned the problem in money printing, which actually boosted Bitcoin. The real debate, Collum says, is what happens when the next crisis comes, and whether Bitcoin finally proves itself or falls with the rest. If you found value in this breakdown, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with other investors who are paying attention. We're here to keep bringing you sharp analysis and voices that actually understand what's unfolding. Thanks for watching.
So let me tell you, when I've seen the evolution of the crypto community, I made the decision not to buy Bitcoin when it was $10. If I bought it, I would have sold it at 50. I know my psyche. I would have said, look, this is a farce. I'm just made fivefold. I'm taking it and running with it. And the profits would have been used to pay for therapy for the next decade. And as I said, the long arm of the state, if they decide they don't want you, I sincerely, to the bottom of my soul, believe they can destroy you. I think that's where some of the hodlers are out of their minds. So if the state says, look, if you use Bitcoin, you're going to get thrown in prison for 10 years. Game's over. Now, but the Bitcoin guys are now all, they started as this very libertarian movement, and young. Revolutions are fueled by young, and in particular young men, no offense, but young men are the ones who are skateboarding down railings and breaking their wrist every day and stuff like that. So it started very libertarian, and now they're all excited that Larry Fink is in on the game and that the government's in on the game. I'm going, you guys are signing off on precisely what it is you defied, and that is government. So I find there's a paradox in that bit of thinking. Well, so if I wanted to bring in, for example, let's say 20 years ago, I knew we were heading for some central bank digital currency, right? The claim that the three NSA guys wrote the first paper on digital currencies. I don't know if that's true, but I keep hearing it. I think it would be brilliant to crowdsource debugging that process. So you release it. You really want to get sinister, you say, okay, Max and Stacy, you guys are going to hype it. I don't go that far, but the idea of getting enthusiasm. So the smartest people in the world are developing the machinery, the on-ramps, the off-ramps, and stuff like that. Now, here's something that I read the other day I think could be spooky, and that is I read a summary of a meeting that a friend of mine who's a military analyst, not intelligence, but an analyst, he went to this meeting, they talked about crypto. And in his notes, there was no mention of Bitcoin. And the question is it possible that they're not really seeing Bitcoin as the future? They see totally crypto, totally blockchain, totally, you name it. But for example, if you had the reserve currency, why would you sign off on a currency that you actually don't own? Right? So I've been told that U.S. has Bitcoins and stuff like that. But the fact is the dollar reserve currency is a gargantuan percentage of the global, and whatever the government owns is trivial compared to that. So sort of rhetorically, I like to ask, are the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds going to give up power to Stacey Max and John Saylor? It doesn't.
Saylor, but no.
Michael, sorry. Yeah, you can tell I'm a real hodler,
No.
can't you? Bitcoin has itself been drawn down many times and rallies back. And so it's making it more and more sort of confident that it always comes back. Bitcoin is yet to go through a real live, serious global liquidity crisis. And what we don't know and what will be fascinating for me to watch is how Bitcoin responds in the next global liquidity crisis, the next really deflationary credit seizing up and stuff. And Bitcoin was a twinkle in someone's eye. Maybe Max owned it, but very few other people owned it. And so it'll be fascinating to see if Bitcoin rallies, if it falls. It'll be fascinating, for example, if at some point the state does try to come down on it and can't. So for me to get into Bitcoin, I am going to want to see Bitcoin come off the battlefield, bruised, sliced, and alive.
Dave Collum, who calls himself a Bitcoin agnostic, raises an unsettling possibility. Maybe governments and elites were never really caught off guard by crypto. Maybe the long-term plan was always to steer things towards central bank digital currencies. If that's true, then the rise of crypto developers, exchanges, and digital infrastructure could have been part of the groundwork. He shares that in a military analyst's meeting about crypto, Bitcoin wasn't even mentioned. To him, that signals the real power players see blockchain and digital money as useful, but they don't see Bitcoin itself as the future. After all, why would the United States, running the world's reserve currency system, step aside and let Bitcoin take over? Collum also highlights Bitcoin's history of boom and bust. It has crashed and recovered many times, but those cycles have happened during periods of abundant liquidity. What Bitcoin hasn't yet faced is a brutal, global liquidity crisis. Something like a major credit freeze where everything gets sold to raise dollars. That's the real test. Even in 2020, when markets froze up, central banks bailed out the system with unprecedented money printing. That flood of liquidity helped Bitcoin recover. The question is, when the next crisis comes and printing isn't enough, does Bitcoin survive or does it get crushed? For Collum, trust in Bitcoin will only come if it can endure that kind of storm. Let's get back to the interview.
When Bitcoin, if it goes through a real live correction, which it has by itself, no question, repeatedly, you really have to have investors say, I'm never buying that crap again. You really got to get to that point. And in 2020, for example, I actually wrote it this way. I said, imagine the opening paragraph of my annual review. I said, at the end of 2020, I said, you wake up having been in a coma for most of 2020 due to a COVID problem. And through this COVID fog, you find out that the entire global economy was shut down by a global pandemic, and every business shut down and every school shut down. And then you look in your hotel room and you look at the TV screen, and there along the bottom of CNBC's station, it says S&P's up 13%. That's wrong. Right. That's wrong. That should have forced a correction. That shows you the insanity of the markets. And so it wasn't a liquidity crisis. It was a liquidity risk. At some point, they'll have a crisis again. They had a risk with Silicon Valley Bank, the three big regionals that went down, which is insanity, by the way. Let's think of the insanity of that. Three serious regional banks, I think the three largest regional banks, went insolvent because, wait for it, they bought too many treasuries.
Right. Their bonds were underwater.
How insane. And people say, well, they should have hedged. I go, yeah, what kind of stupid world are we in that you have to hedge treasuries as a bank to not go insolvent? So we are on the cusp of something ugly. This has got to get corrected. I'm just thinking this just now. There's a block of countries that if they embraced Bitcoin. Now, I know you've got, a couple South American countries that again, the Bitcoiners just adore, Bukele and these guys. What if, and this is a question almost to myself, what if at the end of one of these 25 country BRICS meetings, which by the way, someone at Kitco asked me on a podcast, what do you think about BRICS? I said, well, they just met recently, didn't they? And she said, yeah. And I said, where was the meeting? And she said, it was in Moscow. And I go, we have tried to demonize Moscow, yet 25 countries met in Moscow to talk about a non-US-centric world, right? Send me an email if you start picking up on this. If the BRICS starts talking, not just individuals mumbling about Bitcoin under their breath. If we start to see tangible moves by the 25 countries and counting, BRICS, the producers of the world, as you said, start seriously talking about Bitcoin, that's a different world. So that would catch my attention. The ideal world would be Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it. Ideal world for me, not for you.
Oh, because you want to buy it cheaper.
Bitcoin gets the crap kicked out of it, survives, and BRICS moves to it. And they go, bang.
What stands out in this perspective is the possibility that the crypto revolution might not have been the disruption many believed, but rather a stepping stone towards something entirely different: state-controlled digital money. If central bank digital currencies were always the intended destination, then much of the innovation and infrastructure built by early adopters may have simply accelerated a transition that strengthens official control rather than undermining it. At the same time, the untested nature of Bitcoin in a genuine global liquidity squeeze raises a deeper issue: resilience. Temporary rebounds after crashes prove durability in volatile markets, but they don't answer how Bitcoin would fare when panic selling sweeps through every corner of the system. If such a crisis unfolds without central banks riding to the rescue, that could be the moment when Bitcoin either validates its narrative as independent money or reveals its limits as just another risk asset. If digital currencies issued by central banks are gaining ground while Bitcoin still hasn't been proven in a severe liquidity storm, will the next crisis decide whether Bitcoin is truly a monetary alternative or just a speculative detour on the path to state-managed money? So stay tuned. If you're into real, data-backed takes on the financial system, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the weekly updates. Thank you for the support, and I hope you enjoy the video.